I came home early and caught my husband whispering she'll never know. I wasn't supposed to be home that early. My meeting got canceled last minute, and I figured I'd just head straight back instead of wasting time. On the way, I stopped at our favorite Thai place and grabbed dinner, thinking it would be a nice surprise. I had no reason to suspect anything. I was in a good mood, completely unaware that the second I stepped through the door, everything would change. The house was quiet when I walked in. Normally, Matt had music playing while he worked or the TV on in the background, but there was nothing, just the faint sound of his voice coming from the kitchen. I didn't think much of it at first. He worked from home a few days a week and was always on calls. I almost walked in without a second thought, but something about his tone made me pause. He wasn't speaking the way he usually did during work calls. He was whispering, "She'll never know." I stopped in my tracks. "No, it's fine," he said, his voice still low. "She has no idea, trust me. I'd know if she suspected anything." A long pause. Then a quiet laugh. "Yeah? Same place tomorrow?" "Can't wait." My stomach twisted so hard I thought I might be sick. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there, replaying those words in my head. My brain scrambled for explanations, but there was only one that made sense. He was hiding something, and whatever it was, he was completely sure I'd never find out. I forced myself to take a deep breath. I wanted to storm into the kitchen and demand answers, but something in me held back. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was self-preservation. Either way, I made a split-second decision. I wasn't going to let him know I had heard anything. Not yet. I adjusted the bag in my hand and walked into the kitchen like nothing was wrong. Matt looked up, completely relaxed, smiling like he hadn't just been making secret plans behind my back. "Hey, you're home early," he said, setting his phone down on the counter. I kept my face neutral. "Meeting got canceled?" He nodded like it was no big deal. Nice. I was just about to figure out dinner. His eyes flicked to the takeout bag. "Oh, you got Thai? Perfect timing." He had no idea. I set the bag on the table and forced a smile. "Figured I'd surprise you." Best surprise ever. He grabbed plates, setting everything up like nothing had happened. I sat across from him, barely tasting my food as he told me about his day. He talked about work, mentioned some project he was dealing with, even complained about a bad driver he encountered on the way home from the gym. Just normal conversation. But all I could hear were those words echoing in my head. "She'll never know." Except now I did. I started paying closer attention. The way he barely glanced at his phone the entire meal, but kept it screened down on the table. The way he never asked about my day, not even once, when he usually did. The way he seemed completely at ease, like he wasn't hiding anything, like he hadn't just made plans with someone behind my back. I forced myself to eat, to nod along, to keep my voice steady when I responded. I had no idea how I managed it. I felt like I was going to explode, but I couldn't show it. Not yet. "Want to watch a movie after this?" he asked casually, scooping more rice onto his plate. Every part of me wanted to say no, to tell him I had work to do or that I was too tired. But if I suddenly acted distant, he would notice. He wasn't suspicious yet, and I needed to keep it that way. "Yeah, sure," I said, keeping my tone light. "What are you in the mood for?" He shrugged. "Something easy, maybe a comedy," I nodded, pretending to consider it while my mind raced. He had no idea I had heard him. He had no clue I was already planning my next move. After dinner, we curled up on the couch, but I barely watched the movie. I kept sneaking glances at him, searching for something. Guilt, hesitation, anything that would make him slip up. But there was nothing. He sat next to me, arm draped over my shoulder, laughing at all the right moments. If I hadn't heard him on that call, I never would have suspected a thing. That terrified me more than anything else. That night, he fell asleep almost instantly, like he didn't have a single worry in the world. I stared at the ceiling, listening to his steady breathing, my mind running in circles. I still didn't know exactly what he was hiding. I had no proof, no names, no details, just that one moment. But it was enough. By the time morning came, I had a plan. I wasn't going to ask him about it. I wasn't going to fight with him or beg for the truth. He had been so sure I would never know. That meant he wasn't being careful. That meant there were things for me to find. And I was going to find them. I woke up the next morning before Matt. He was still asleep, breathing evenly, looking like a man with nothing to hide. I watched him for a long time, wondering how many times I had woken up next to him like this, completely unaware of what he was doing behind my back. I tried to count the number of mornings I had kissed him goodbye, sent him texts during the day, and waited for him to come home, never once questioning where he really was. Now, I couldn't stop questioning everything. The weight of what I had heard was suffocating, but I forced myself to push it down. If I let myself spiral, I'd make a mistake. I couldn't let Matt know that anything had changed. If he had spent this long lying to me, then he was good at it. That meant I had to be better. I needed real proof before I confronted him, something undeniable. If I went to him now, he'd just lie, gaslight me, twist things around until I was the one doubting myself. I wasn't giving him that chance. I got up, showered, and got dressed for work like it was any other day. When Matt finally woke up, he rolled over and pulled me close, murmuring something about how good I smelled. I wanted to shove him away, but I didn't. Instead, I kissed his forehead and told him I had a long day ahead. He smiled, stretched, and told me to have a good day. He had no idea I had already decided to destroy his little secret. As soon as I got to work, I logged into our phone records. Matt and I were on the same plan, so I had full access to his call history. I scrolled through the logs looking for anything that stood out. There it was, an unsaved number that had been popping up for months. Some calls were only a few minutes, but others were much longer. One had lasted nearly an hour. That wasn't a coworker. That wasn't a random wrong number. That was her. I copied the number and pasted it into Google, hoping it would link to something. Nothing. No business, no name, no public records. It was either a personal number or a burner phone. My stomach twisted. If it was just some meaningless fling, why would he go through the trouble of keeping it this private? I considered calling it but stopped myself. If Matt was cheating, I needed more than just a phone number. I needed something undeniable. I spent the rest of the day coming up with a plan. I replayed the conversation I had overheard, focusing on the one thing that stood out. Same place tomorrow. That meant they had a routine, a specific place where they met. I just had to figure out where. But I couldn't follow him myself. If he saw me, he'd know immediately that something was wrong. I needed another way to track him, something he wouldn't suspect. That night, I pretended nothing had changed. I made dinner, laughed at his stupid jokes, even let him wrap his arms around me while we watched TV. He had no idea I had already found the number he'd been calling. No idea I was already several steps ahead of him. He sat there next to me, completely at ease, because he still thought I was clueless. I wanted to scream at him, to tell him I knew, but I kept my voice light and steady. The next morning, I told him I had a late work meeting. He kissed me goodbye, told me not to wait up, and walked out the door without a care in the world. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the empty hallway, then turned and went straight to the bedroom. His gym bag was sitting in the corner, exactly where he always left it. I unzipped it, digging through his workout clothes until I found what I was looking for. His old smartwatch. Matt had stopped using it months ago when he upgraded, but he never bothered to reset it. When I turned it on, it automatically connected to my phone. I checked the settings. GPS tracking was still enabled. I shoved the watch back into his bag, zipped it up, and put everything exactly as I had found it. When Matt left that night, he would have no idea that I was tracking his every move. I spent the day pretending to be busy with work while I watched his location update in real time. Around 6:30 p.m., he texted me, saying he'd be home late because he was grabbing drinks with a coworker. I responded casually, pretending I wasn't watching his little blue dot move across town. He wasn't at a bar, he wasn't anywhere near his office. He had driven across the city to a quiet little neighborhood, parked outside an apartment complex, and stayed there. The minutes dragged on. He wasn't running an errand, he wasn't picking something up, he was inside, with her. I sat in my car across the street, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I had known, of course I had known, but seeing it in real time made it worse. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This wasn't paranoia. This was proof. He had been so sure I would never know. But now I did. I stayed parked across the street, watching his car sit in the same spot without moving. I checked the time again. An hour had passed, then another. If this was just some innocent visit, he would have been in and out. But he wasn't running errands, and he wasn't meeting a coworker. He was inside, doing exactly what I already knew he was doing. I didn't go up to the apartment. I could have, but I wasn't going to give him the chance to lie his way out of it. I already had the proof I needed. I sat there long enough to be sure, then drove home, my mind already racing through my next steps. When I walked through the door, the house felt different. Maybe it was because I knew what was happening, or maybe it was because I finally saw it for what it was. A place filled with lies. A place I had spent years building with someone who didn't respect me enough to be honest. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel betrayed. I just felt done. I went straight to the bedroom and started pulling out his things. I didn't cry, didn't hesitate. I took everything that belonged to him, his clothes, his shoes, his toiletries, and tossed them into trash bags. I put his bags by the front door, took my ring off and set it on the kitchen counter where he would see it the second he walked in. I wasn't going to wait for him to come home and pretend everything was normal. I wasn't going to sit through another dinner where he smiled at me like he wasn't sleeping with someone else. I grabbed my purse, walked out, and drove to a friend's house for the night. Matt called me around midnight, probably expecting me to be asleep. I let it go to voicemail. His text came a few minutes later. "Hey, just got home. Where are you?" I didn't answer. The next morning I went back to the house. His car was in the driveway. I walked inside and found him in the kitchen, standing next to his packed bags, staring at my ring on the counter. He turned when he heard me, his face blank. "What is this?" His voice was steady, like he thought this was a misunderstanding, like he could still talk his way out of it. I didn't say anything. I just pulled out my phone and showed him the location history from his smartwatch. His face changed in an instant. His mouth opened, then shut. There was nothing he could say. I had the proof. He started with the usual excuses. It wasn't what it looked like. It was just a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I let him talk, not because I believed him, but because I wanted to hear just how far he'd go to try and save himself. When he realized I wasn't reacting, he tried shifting the blame. "If you had just told me something was wrong, maybe I wouldn't have needed to look for something else." I laughed at that. He had been sneaking around for months, and somehow this was my fault? I grabbed his bags and pushed them toward him. "We're done," I said, and I meant it. He stood there for a long time like he was waiting for me to change my mind. When he finally spoke again, his voice was quieter. "Where am I supposed to go?" I shrugged. "Not my problem." He stared at me like he didn't recognize me, like he couldn't believe I wasn't giving him a second chance. Maybe he had convinced himself that I would cry, that I would scream, that I would beg him to explain, but I wasn't giving him that satisfaction. I just waited for him to pick up his things and leave. He grabbed his bags, hesitated for a second, then walked out. I didn't watch him go. I just shut the door behind him and locked it. The house was silent after he left. No footsteps, no fake apologies, no more lies being whispered when he thought I wasn't listening. Just me, standing in the middle of the life we had built together, realizing how much of it had been a lie. I had expected to feel relief the moment he walked out, but I didn't feel much of anything. The anger had burned out, the sadness had faded, and all that was left was an emptiness I wasn't sure how to fill. I moved through the house slowly, taking in the mess he left behind. His coffee cup was still sitting in the sink. His slippers were near the couch, exactly where he had kicked them off the night before. His shampoo was in the shower like he was going to come back and use it. I started grabbing things, shoving them into a trash bag. Little remnants of him that had no place in my home anymore. By the time I finished, the house felt different, lighter, like something toxic had finally been drained out of it. I opened all the windows, letting the air clear, letting everything breathe again. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was suffocating under the weight of his lies. That night, Matt called again. I watched his name light up my screen and let it go to voicemail. He left a long, desperate message about how he had messed up, how he hated himself for what he had done, how he just wanted to talk. The next morning, the text started, paragraphs about how we could fix this, how we were stronger than one mistake, how we couldn't just throw everything away over one bad decision. I didn't respond. A few days later, his mother called. I should have known she would get involved. I let it go to voicemail, already knowing exactly what she was going to say. When I finally listened, it was worse than I expected. "Marriage is about forgiveness," she told me. "You can't just walk away because of one mistake. You have to fight for each other." It was almost laughable. I was supposed to fight for him after he spent months sneaking around behind my back? I blocked her number after that. Mutual friends started reaching out soon after. Some were just checking in, wanting to hear my side of things. Others had clearly already spoken to Matt. He was playing the role of devastated husband to anyone who would listen, painting himself as the guy who made a mistake but was trying to make things right. He wanted people to believe that I had thrown our marriage away over something small, that I was cold for not even giving him a chance to explain. I ignored all of it. I didn't care what he told people. I didn't owe him a response. The divorce process was easier than I thought it would be. Matt didn't fight it, probably because he knew he didn't have a leg to stand on. The papers were signed, and just like that, it was over. There was no final conversation, no dramatic moment of closure, just paperwork, signatures, and the quiet realization that my life was mine again. At first, it was strange being alone, not lonely, just different. I had spent years with Matt, planning around him, considering his opinions, making sure we were moving forward together. Now, I only had to think about myself. I started doing small things just because I could, buying food he never liked, redecorating the bedroom, sleeping sprawled out in the middle of the bed. Every little change made me feel lighter. A few months later, I went out with some friends for the first time in a while. We laughed, ordered too many drinks, stayed out late, and for the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Matt. I wasn't wondering where he was, who he was with, or what lies he was telling. I was just living. At one point in the night, someone asked if I had heard from him. I hadn't. I had no idea where he was or what he was doing, and I didn't care. Apparently, things hadn't been going well for him. He had burned some bridges, lost a few friends, bounced between places, never quite landing anywhere. Kristen was out of the picture, too. Maybe she had finally seen him for the liar he was. Maybe he had tried the same tricks on her, and she hadn't been as forgiving. For a second, I thought I might feel something. Pity? Satisfaction? Anything? But there was nothing. His life was falling apart, but it wasn't my problem anymore. I had already cleaned up the only part that mattered, getting rid of him. At some point in the night, a friend nudged me and asked if I was finally ready to start dating again. A few months ago, I would have laughed at the idea, but now? I wasn't in a rush, but I wasn't clinging to the past either. I guess we'll see, I said, and for the first time in a long time, I actually meant it.